This is the lecture on tissues, which is from chapter 4 of the textbook. And I'll start with just a quick definition of tissues, just to refresh your memory. Tissues are made up of a group of cells that are similar in structure, and they are performing a common function. There are 4 basic tissue types. First of all, nervous tissue detects changes that occur and it responds appropriately in order to help maintain homeostasis. Muscle tissue contracts to allow for movements. Epithelial tissue covers the body and it lines body cavities and ducts and vessels. It also forms glands. And connective tissue has many functions. It supports, it protects the body. It also binds other tissues together. And we're going to start by focusing on epithelial tissue, which is a continuous sheet of cells that are tightly packed together, and it either covers the body surface or lines a body cavity, or it can form glands. So those are the 2 forms within the body. It's either a covering and a lining, or it's glandular epithelium, which is the type that forms the glands of the body. For the functions of epithelium, it offers protection because it's the outer surface of the body and of many of the organs. Absorption, so substances can be absorbed across epithelial tissue, things like vitamins, UV light. Filtration, so epithelial tissue can allow certain substances to cross, but prevents others from doing so. So it's kind of selective in what can cross and what can't. It also allows for excretion, which is basically getting rid of waste products. Secretion, which is secreting a product onto the epithelial tissue surface. That could be something like oil, for example. And also sensory reception. There are sensory receptors found in epithelial tissue, which allow for it to detect different types of sensations. All right, so now I'll go over some special characteristics of epithelial tissue. There are 2 definite surfaces found on epithelial cells. The apical surface is the free surface, which is found across the top. So this is the side that faces the body surface or a cavity. And then there's the basal surface, which is located opposite of the apical surface. And that's found like on the bottom of the cells. Epithelial tissue is always supported by connective tissue. So in this picture, the epithelial tissue is shown in pink. The connective tissue is shown in blue. There's always connective tissue underneath for support. Then there is always a basement membrane that's located in between the epithelial tissue and the connective tissue. And that helps the tissues to resist stretching and tearing forces. And there's 2 layers that make up the basement membrane, the basal lamina, which is right under the basal surface, and the reticular lamina. So those 2 together make up the basement membrane. As far as the epithelial cells and their connections, there are specialized connections here. Remember, we learned about cell junctions, and the 2 types of cell junctions that are often found between epithelial cells holding them together are tight junctions and desmosomes. Both of these are really strong cell junctions that hold cells really tightly together. Also, epithelial tissue is avascular, which means that it does not contain blood vessels. There is no blood supply to this tissue, but it is innervated, which means that it is supplied by nerves. You can see the yellow nerve endings extending up into the epithelial tissue here. And finally, epithelial tissue is capable of regeneration. That means that it has a very high rate of cell division, and that is to replace cells that are dead and that fall off, basically. That happens all the time with skin. We are losing cells from the skin surface, and they need to be replaced. All right. In terms of the epithelial tissue types. There are two ways that epithelial tissue is classified. It's based on the number of cell layers and the shape of the cells found within those layers. So first of all, there can be simple epithelium, which means there's one layer of cells. Stratified means that there are two or more layers of cells. And pseudostratified means there's one layer of cells, but it actually looks like there's many. So it's only one layer, but it looks like there might be a few layers. And then it's also classified based on the shape of the cells involved. There are squamous cells, which are thin, flat cells. Cuboidal cells are cube-shaped cells. Columnar cells are tall, column-shaped cells. And then there's also transitional. This is when cells can change their shape. And that's usually due to stretching. So the cells will go from like being cuboidal, for example, to squamous when they get stretched flat. So I'm going to go through the various types of epithelial tissue to allow you to fill in the chart that's in your outline. And we'll start with the simple epithelial tissue first, which usually performs absorption, secretion, or filtration, or more than one of those functions. So first of all, there's simple squamous epithelium. This allows for the exchange of substances. It's the thinnest layer of tissue you can have. It's a single layer of flat cells. So this performs filtration or diffusion. Substances can pass pretty easily across this type of tissue. This is found in the lungs where you have gas exchange. So simple squamous epithelium makes up the alveoli of the lungs, which are basically the air sacs, which are found in the lungs. Then there's simple cuboidal, which is a single layer of cube-shaped cells, and that performs absorption and secretion, and it's found in the tubes of the kidneys. Then there's simple columnar epithelium, which also has the function of absorption and secretion. And simple columnar tissue almost always has either microvilli on the apical surface of the cells, or it has cilia. And depending on what modification it has, it'll perform maybe a slightly different function. When it has microvilli, this is found in the digestive tract. And the microvilli are projections that extend up from the membrane of the apical surface of the cell. And they increase the cell's surface area for absorption. So whenever you have microvilli, that allows for absorption. So it makes sense that you would have this lining the digestive tract. You can also have simple columnar epithelial tissue that has cilia. Cilia are teeny tiny hairs that are found, again, on the apical surface of these cells. And the cilia can move. And often you'll find this type of tissue in the respiratory tract, where you have little hairs that can trap any like dust or debris that you may inhale by accident. And then finally, there's pseudostratified columnar epithelium with goblet cells. So remember, pseudostratified means that it's one layer, but it looks like many. And columnar cells are the tall column-shaped cell. And there are goblet cells that are found among these columnar cells. The function of this tissue is absorption and secretion. It's often found in the respiratory system. And the goblet cells are responsible for secretion of mucus. So moving on to the second chart, we'll look at stratified epithelium. Stratified means many layers. And the first type here is stratified squamous, where you have many layers of flat cells. All the top layers are flat cells, but sometimes in the very bottom layers, the cells do look kind of cube-shaped. But this is stratified squamous. Its function is protection because it is made up of many layers. It is pretty durable and provides protection. It's found in areas where you have a lot of wear and tear, like your skin. So this is what makes up your skin. And then the last type is transitional. And remember, we said before that this type of tissue allows for stretching. It's found in the ureters in the urinary bladder. These areas have to stretch to accommodate urine as it passes through. All right, and then remember, there's also glandular epithelium, which forms glands. And a gland can be either one cell or a group of cells that make and secrete a product. And there are two types of glands. Endocrine glands secrete hormones into the blood, and exocrine glands secrete a non-hormone product either into a duct or onto a surface.